Good morning. Welcome back to another read aloud of Hero. I've got Diego slumbering behind me. I don't know if you can hear his snoring. We've got Otter as always. We've got a shark here to protect me just in case Spence comes around. And we've got our nice beautiful heart mug. Alright. Let's pick up where we left off. Chapter 6. Zach wasn't the only one trying to settle back into old routines and fit them around his new life. His mom was too. Even before his dad had died, his mom had been working hard to help get Senator Robert Kerrigan of New York's elected president. And not just because Senator Kerrigan went all the way back to Harvard with Zach's dad, the way Uncle John did. She believed in the good of the man. It was why she was back in the campaign full time, throwing herself into it harder than ever before. His mom, Elizabeth Townsend Harriman, was pretty famous herself. She was the daughter of former U.S. Senator, niece of a former Secretary of State, and now ran the Townsend Foundation, traveling the world to give Townsend Foundation money away to people in need. I need the work, she explained to Zach. I need the outlet. I need something to take my mind off of what happened. And on top of all that, this country needs Bob Kerrigan. Mom, Zach said, you don't have to explain it to me. I know how much Dad likes Senator Kerrigan. I see him sometimes on TV, and even I like listening to his speeches. Senator Kerrigan had been a few years behind Zach's dad at Harvard, and both of them had ended up in government service. Tom Harriman had become President Addison's troubleshooter, the Globetrotter. Bob Kerrigan had started out as a New York City lawyer, become a judge, and gone to work in the Justice Department, before finally becoming President Addison's Attorney General. But eventually, he'd moved back to New York and run for the U.S. Senate and won. Last year, he'd surprised everybody, including Zach's mom and dad, by announcing in the middle of his first term in the Senate that he was going to run to succeed President Addison, whose term limit of 8 years was almost up. And he was supposed to be the same kind of long shot, the same kind of inexperienced guy that Zach knew President Addison had been when he got elected. Except now, he was the front runner in the polls, even running against the current vice president, Dick Barras. Zach's mom had explained to him that usually the sitting vice president was a shoo-in to get the nomination. Just not this time. When Zach had asked why not, she said, well, because Vice President Boris is old and mean, and Bill Addison never should have picked him as a running mate in the first place. That works for me, Zach said. Tonight, his mom was holding a fundraiser for Senator Kerrigan at the apartment, her first big social occasion of any kind since Zach's dad had died. Down the road, there would be a much bigger New York City event for Senator Kerrigan in Central Park, one that Zach's mom was already planning in her head. For now, she was using the Harriman name and Townsend, her maiden name, to attract people who were willing to make contributions to the Kerrigan campaign. Small crowd, she said, but deep pockets. Oh, Zach said, rich people, my favorite. I know. Hush, his mom said, and go make sure your nice clothes are clean. He used an old line on his dad's on her then, knowing it would make her smile. Don't worry about me tonight, Mom, he said. I promise not to bother the decent people. She pointed upstairs. Go, she said. I have to go to the kitchen now and yell at the caterer a little more. But she looked happy just to be busy. For the first time, she'd really looked that way to Zach since the funeral. That was good enough for him. He was keeping himself busy, too, on a campaign of his own, just not the one he wanted to tell anyone about, at least not yet. Well, apparently, Diego has decided to lay on the hard wooden floor instead of the soft chair. But at least he can still hear the story. Zach put on the same blazer and tie he'd worn to his dad's funeral, telling himself that they were just clothes, and putting them on didn't mean you had to be sad all over again. Kate was in the new dress Alba had bought for her. You look great, Zach said when she came to his room to get him. And you, Kate said, looking about as happy to be dressed up as you always are. And then she couldn't help herself and straightened his tie. Zach had never seen a politician give a speech in person. He'd met plenty of them, gotten to shake Senator Kerrigan's hand at the funeral, and even President Addison's, but he'd never been in a crowd like this one in his living room. Some people sitting, most standing, Secret Service guys with their dark suits and earpieces, leaning against walls, standing in front of windows, taking in the whole scene. But as soon as Senator Kerrigan started talking, Zach understood why everyone had come here to hear him and meet him, and give him boatloads of money. "I would have paid to see this," Kate said in a whisper from where they were standing, near a door to the kitchen. Zach had promised his mom that they'd stay out of the way for the most part. "Same," Zach said. "He's talking to some of the biggest and most famous people in New York," Kate said, "but it's like he could be talking to our class." Senator Kerrigan began by talking specific issues about war and immigration and the economy, but then he shifted to the difference in life between taking tough and actually being tough. Between talking tough and actually being tough. About courage and honor and doing the right thing and trusting your instincts and never wavering on your core beliefs. It was all in context of talking about America, but somehow Zach felt as if the senator were talking directly to him. And Zach knew everybody in the apartment, including Kate, felt exactly the same way. Eventually, Senator Kerrigan talked about Zach's dad, how nobody forced him to serve his country, how he wasn't drafted into doing so, how he decided on his own that service, courage, and honor were his destiny. Tom Harriman was smart enough to know that a person can never escape his or her destiny, Senator Kerrigan said. "You can try to ignore it, but you can't hide from it. Tom Harriman hid from no one." The room burst into applause, Zach clapping harder than anybody, feeling tears in his eyes. But Senator Kerrigan wasn't finished. "Tom Harriman was the finest man I've ever met," he said. "He's the one who convinced me that I was the right person to succeed Bill Addison. So here I am, trying to do that, asking for your support," he grinned, "and trying to empty your pockets." When the laughter died down, he was serious again. "It is time for all of us to embrace the destiny, the true mission for the United States of America, in good times and in bad. We must all be strong, we must all be brave," his voice rising now as if the windows were open and he wanted the whole city to hear him. "We must honor this country's ideals in the same way I honor the members and the memory of the man who lived in this home where we have come together tonight." The room exploded with applause again. Even the ones who had been sitting on the couches and chairs jumped to their feet. Zach looked across at his mom, who seemed to be smiling and crying at the same time, applauding along with everyone else. "Wow," Kate said. "Wow, wow, wow." Zach said, "I want to start campaigning for him tonight." "Take me with you," she said. They went upstairs. They went upstairs then, Kate to finish her homework and Zach to get back on his laptop. About an hour later, he heard a surge in the conversation level, walked briefly out of his room, looked downstairs and saw people starting to leave. A few minutes later, there was a knock on his door. When he opened it, Senator Kerrigan was standing there. He had taken off his tie by then and buttoned the jacket to his suit. It occurred to Zach that the senator reminded him a little bit of George Clooney, but with even grayer hair. "Awesome speech," Zach said. "You listened from up here?" Zach said, "Nah, I was hiding in the back." "They seemed to like it." "Are you joking?" Zach said. "They loved it. Now I know why my mom is working so hard to get you the nomination." Senator Kerrigan placed a hand on Zach's desk chair and said, "May I?" Zach nodded. The senator sat and Zach took a seat at the end of the bed. "This probably won't come as a shock to you," Senator Kerrigan said, grinning, "but sometimes I feel as if I'm working for her." Zach heard a buzzing sound. Senator Kerrigan whipped out his BlackBerry, nodded in a tired way. "Listen, I've got to be going. I'm flying to Ohio tonight, but before I left, I wanted to let you know how I felt about your dad. That wasn't just another campaign speech downstairs. That came from the heart. He really was the finest man I've ever known." "Thanks," Zach said. "Me too." The senator said, "The world became less safe as soon as he was gone, and our enemies probably see an opening." And Zach just sat there, listening to him now, the way he had downstairs, still trying to process the fact that somebody who might be the next president of the United States was actually sitting in his bedroom. Senator Kerrigan stood up, and so did Zach. The senator said, "Well, we'll have to have a longer talk about this next time we're together." He put his hand on Zach and shook it, hearing his dad's voice in his head as he did, making sure he looked Senator Kerrigan right in the eyes. "Your father was willing to do whatever it took to keep our enemies from winning, and so am I." "I believe you, sir," said Zach. "Be strong," Senator Kerrigan said. "You be strong, Zach Harriman." Then he turned and left. Zach stood there in the middle of the room, feeling the man's presence even when he was gone. Then he quietly sat with Kate and said what Kate had said earlier. Wow. Wow, wow, wow. The loud voices from downstairs woke him up. His clock radio saying it was 3 minutes after midnight. At first, Zach thought he might have been dreaming, but then the voices got louder. He got out of bed, pushed his door open a couple inches, and realized immediately that it was his mom and Uncle John. He had never once heard them argue about anything, but they sure seemed to be arguing about something now. John, Elizabeth Harriman said, lower your voice. Just because I don't agree with you, he said, doesn't mean I'm shouting. Well, it certainly sounds that way to me. The two of them were standing in the front of the elevator, Uncle John's coat over his arm. I'm right about this, he said. Sometimes it seems as if you've joined a cult. I'm working for a candidate I believe in, she said. One my husband, who was your best friend in the world, believed in just as passionately. Tom only saw the things in Bob Kerrigan he wanted to see, Uncle John said. The same slick, polished Bob Kerrigan the voters are seeing. You're saying he's a phony, she said. Uncle John shook his head. They're all phonies, he said. He just happens to be the one who's trying to become president. He's neither prepared nor strong enough, despite all of his fancy words about strength and toughness. Were you watching the audience tonight? Zach's mom said. Did you see how his message resonated with them? They're in love with the words. Everybody is these days. But it takes more than words to lead this country. Now Zach heard the anger in his mother's voice again, her voice rising even though she had just told Uncle John to keep his down. It's not just rhetoric, John. It's ideas and ideals. He's a man of great substance. He's a man of great style. You're wrong, she said. I'm not sure I've ever heard you be this wrong about anything, and you're not going to change my mind about him. He's not just style. It's the obligation of the family lawyer to do that, he said, even when it's the head of the family who's wrong. You can do that next time I am, she said. Now, good night. Zach watched as she pressed the elevator button for him, turned and walked into the kitchen. So she didn't see the look on Uncle John's face, the anger in it as he watched her go, and Uncle John, even Zach, didn't recognize. Next to the elevator door, on a table everyone who entered the apartment to see, was a framed photograph Zach's mom had placed there. Tom Harriman and Senator Kerrigan, when they were much younger, the two of them standing on Pennsylvania Avenue with the White House behind them, arms around each other. As the elevator door opened, Uncle John took the picture out of its stand, took a long look at it, one hand holding the door open. Then he slammed it hard on the table and left. All right, that leaves us at chapter 7 now. You get that over there? Lying on the floor, just listening to the read aloud. Okay. So, it seems that Zach and his mom really like the Senator Kerrigan. But for some reason, Uncle John thinks he's not the person he's pretending to be. I don't know. His words seem pretty powerful, but we'll see what happens. There's a lot going on, a lot to question, a lot to think about. Let's see what we can figure out next time. I'll see you then.